Have you ever heard a musical artist described as having great chops? What does that mean? Well, the term chops is slang in the music business that refers to an artist that has developed great skills over time, whether they are a musician, composer, producer, or other titles associated with the music business. This is Scott Grimaldi, your host of Got Chops. Join me as I interview one musical artist per episode that I've had the pleasure of either performing, recording, or work with in my career. Plus, I'll be interviewing artists I've always wanted to speak with. We'll discover how each artist developed their chops, listen to their stories, and much more. This is Got Chops. My special guest artist for today is a recording engineer, guitarist, and owner of Shorefire Recording Studios in Long Branch, New Jersey. That's him on the track behind me, playing guitar on his composition Wild Honey that he recorded and mixed for his band The Killing Floor Project. He started playing guitar at 9 years old, studying with Jon Herington from Steely Dan and jazz great Tal Farlow. My guest has worked besides two of the most respected recording engineers of all time, Andy Johns and Eddie Kramer, and has engineered at Abbey Road Studios in London, England. He has worked with or recorded at Shorefire Recording Studios with iconic artists that include Blondie, Bon Jovi, and Bruce Springsteen, just to name a few. In addition, he plays lead guitar in the tribute band Pure McCartney. This multi-talented recording engineer, guitarist, and entrepreneur certainly got chops. Please welcome Joey DeMaio. Good morning, Joey. This is Scott from Got Chops. How are you?
Hey, Scott. I'm great. First of all, let me thank you for having me on your show. I've been really looking forward to doing this interview with you.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to interviewing you. So for my listeners, Joey DeMaio and I have been friends for many, many years. He's an outstanding recording engineer and owner of the legendary Shorefire Recording Studios in Long Branch, New Jersey. I know him from the other side of the glass where I would be in recording sessions as he's manning the board. As a recording engineer, session guitarist, and owner of the legendary Shorefire Recording Studios, what does the music slang Got Chops mean to you?
Well, first of all, let me just say you're way too kind calling Shorefire legendary, but it's much appreciated. Shorefire's been there for a minute. But as far as the term Got Chops is concerned, for me as a guitar player, and a musician, of course, it means to me someone that can really play, someone who could really solo and improvise, whether it's a guitar player, obviously, or, keyboard player, any musician that could play, really, they could read phenomenally well, and they could they're just almost a virtuoso in their talents, is what I would consider Got Chops meaning.
Absolutely. Great answer. So do you hear other musicians in your studio use the same music slang, chops?
Occasionally, I would think it, when I do hear guys talking about, it's mostly the older cats, because I would imagine that term, came from, I don't know where it originated or how it originated, but I would think it would be, certainly, 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe, so yeah, it would definitely be, some of the, more seasoned guys, I don't think I've ever heard any of the younger kids use that term, but yeah, people still use it occasionally in the studio. Absolutely.
So you hail from the Jersey Shore. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Jersey City. My family, was originally from Jersey City. I was born in Christ Hospital, and we lived there until I was I'd say 9, and then at that point we moved to Belmar in Monmouth County, New Jersey. My father's mother had been down here for many years prior to that. She owned a home, and I guess she was the original like Airbnb. She had a bed and breakfast, and so that's what she did. She had this huge house in Belmar, and she cooked, and so in the summertime she always had many guests, because Belmar was a great place to spend your summers. I mean, it still is, but back then it was a little bit less hectic, for lack of a better term, down in Belmar, and in that whole kind of southern Monmouth County area. So yeah, so born in Jersey City, and then when I was 9, we moved to Belmar, and I've been in Monmouth County ever since.
It's a great area. It really is great.
Yeah, I feel blessed to have grown up here. It's we moved around a little bit. So I mean, I was, like I said, we were in Belmar. We had a home in Bradley Beach. Also, my father was very friendly with Frank Sinatra growing up. So we lived in Palm Springs, because my father and Frank were close friends, and I had spent time around Frank, and so then we came back to New Jersey, and yeah, so I've been here ever since. I got married. We lived in yeah, so it's been Monmouth County pretty much my whole life.
Wow. I can see a part 2 of this podcast just talking about the connections your family has with Frank Sinatra. Wow.
Yeah, that it was a special time for sure.
Ooh, I'll have to talk to you more about that. I mean, in all the years I've known you, I never heard that. Wow.
Yeah, it's something that it's a very fond memory, of course, and I don't feel the need to have to exploit it for any reason other than it was just a great time in our lives for sure.
Did you come from a musical family?
Not that I really know of specifically. My mother always told me that her father was an opera singer in Italy. Um, but I mean, I have many cousins on my mother's side that play, that are singers and guitarists and play piano, and there's a few on my father's side, but it wasn't specifically like my household. My father was a concert pianist, or my mother was a concert violinist or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's in the blood, but it wasn't you know directly from my parents as far as I know. I mean, it was their parents, and probably more from the old country.
Well, oftentimes we pick up things in our genes, it skips a generation.
Right, right, exactly.
So, what age did you begin to play and study music? And I know that you're a guitarist, so was guitar your first instrument?
Yeah, so when we moved down to the shore, my mother, she was really, well, almost, I guess she was ahead of her time, but she saw that I was, having a hard time, kind of simulating in and making friends, and she, wanted me, to take music lessons, and she brought me to a local music store in Belmar, and she bought me my first guitar, and that's how it started. Yeah, when I was 9, as soon as we pretty much moved down to the shore. So yeah, guitar was my first and primary instrument, and still is, of course. I dabble on pretty much anything that has a string on it. I could make a noise out of it, whether it's a mandolin or a banjo or bass or whatever. But yeah, so it's always been guitar for me.
And I know you study privately with the legendary studio guitarist Jon Herington, who has been a band member of Steely Dan since 1999 and recorded on a number of their great albums. So, when and where and how long did you study with him?
Yeah, so John was my first guitar teacher. When I first started
Wow.
taking lessons. Yeah, yeah. So when I was very young boy, Jon Herington was teaching guitar at a local music store in Belmore called Blue Note Music, and that's who I wound up taking lessons from, and it was a huge influence on me, and I'm really indebted to John for inspiring me, of course, because he's such a phenomenal player. Even when I was just picking it up, I knew the talent that he has. Um, and then of course he's just a wonderful human being in person. Really. I love John to death, and so yeah, I studied with John. When I was young, for several years, and then I kind of took a break from lessons, and then when I was older and I was driving, I studied with John again privately. He would sometimes come down to um, the area and give private lessons at other people's homes, and he would come to my home or I would go to his home. Yeah, so I studied on and off with John for at least 10 years.
Wow. So was that during the time that he was with Steely Dan?
No, that was much prior to that. That would definitely have been in the 70s and early 80s. Yeah, so I guess he probably didn't start with Steely Dan maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. Somewhere in that area, I think, is when he started his tenure with them.
Did he ever tell you how he got that gig?
We never really talked about it, so I don't know. But I can only assume that he was, friendly with the guys, being in New York, and they must have heard of him, and seen him play. And, because John is just, he has chops. You want to talk about somebody who has chops?
Oh, he
There
does.
you go. Yeah, I mean, just a, phenomenal improviser. He comps chords like nobody's business. And he could read. He's just all around. He's a triple threat there, I would say.
His sound, that's his signature talent right there. I mean, he does all the above that you just mentioned, but what a biting sound, and he's right in the pocket,
Yeah, well, isn't that, usually a sign of someone that is in demand, right? I
right?
mean, you could play, you could read, you have a great sound, and I tell that same thing to a lot of people, when they come into the studio to record, they want their drums to sound like this, or they want their, guitar to sound like that. And I said, yeah, well, those are all great references, and I understand, what you're looking for, but it has to start at the source. If it doesn't sound good at the source, if you're not hitting the drums a certain way, or if you're not attacking the guitar a certain way, it's not going to translate on the recording. So, but yeah, go back to John. Yeah, I mean, his touch and his feel and his phrasing and his timing are just impeccable.
So I read that when you were 18 years old, I didn't know about this, you opened your own retail music store called The Guitar Place in Bradley Beach, New Jersey. What was that experience like to be an entrepreneur at such an early age?
Yeah, and that was a great time as well in my life. Yeah, right out of high school, I have been so from studying with John and I, we didn't talk about it, but also I studied with Tal Farlow for a little bit. Tal also taught at Blue Note Music. They had several stores in the area, and he taught at the Long Branch store. So I had Tal as one of my teachers and John. So I became relatively proficient at guitar early. I don't want to say it came easy to me, but I adapted to it. Playing, and it was pretty natural thing for me. It just I don't know, for whatever reason. You know how it is. Some people, just take the different things and they excel at them, and others it's more of a struggle. It was never really a struggle for me to play guitar. I mean, obviously, there are so many guitar players in the world that are just phenomenal, and I'm not even remotely suggesting that at all. But it came relatively easy to me, and I wound up teaching guitar when I was 16.
Wow.
So I was teaching guitar for a few years, and then once I graduated high school, I had a friend of mine that wanted to start a business. He was older. He was a little bit older than me. He was in his 30s at the time, and yeah, we said, okay, well, we found a spot in Bradley Beach, and we basically catered to just guitar and guitar players. We bought and sold used guitars and amplifiers. We gave lessons. We did repairs. We had a couple of new lines. We carried Randall amplifiers at the time that we were able to secure them as one of our what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it was one of our dealers that we had. We had deals with Diodario Strings and different companies like that. So we did sell some new stuff, but mostly it was buying and selling used guitars. We had accessories, of course, amplifiers, like I said, and lessons. Lessons were a big part of the business, of course.
Wow. So, where in Bradley Beach, and what were the years that you had that store operating?
So it was on Main Street in Bradley Beach, directly across the street from the post office. So I'm not sure what the two side streets are there. It might be Brindley Avenue on one side and maybe Fifth on the other. I'm not positive. Yeah, but it was right on Main Street. It was a little shop. I would certainly would have called it a mom and pop shop back then. It wasn't, very big, but we had several booths for lessons. We had a repair shop in the back, and of course we had the storefront where we had the guitars and the amps and things like that. And so as far as my time frame, I wasn't there very long. I kind of got I, frustrated is not the word, but I realized, relatively fast that I didn't want to be in retail. It wasn't something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the teaching part of it, but as far as sitting behind a counter and answering the phone and waiting for people to come in and dealing with sales reps and all that stuff, that's not what I wanted to do. So I would say about 2 or 3 years I had it, and then I sold my portion of it to my partner, and he kept it for many years after that.
Is it still in existence?
It is not. Yeah, he had closed down some years ago
Ah.
and moved to Florida. Yeah, so.
And so, besides the guitar, when did you also become interested in recording engineering?
That's a really great question. So growing up, I was obviously fascinated by the guitar, and I really have to thank my cousin Johnny Flora. I mean, he's really the first one to show me anything on the guitar. When I first got my guitar, he showed me how to play "Smoke on the Water," which I guess is pretty much like playing "Stairway to Heaven." Although "Stairway's a little bit harder to play, when you're first learning how to play. But he showed me "Smoke on the Water," and then I was, captivated with that. But so yeah, once I started playing and listening to music growing up, of course, there was a lot of music in my house, and I was always kind of fascinated with both parts of it. I love the guitar and the playing part of it, but I was also very, very interested at an early age of, what that sound was. Wow, I mean, what is that? Why does it sound like that? Man, that sounds great. And really the thing that really set it off for me was the first time I heard "Whole Lot of Love" by Led Zeppelin. That guitar riff was just, it was like, oh my God, what is this? There was just so much raw energy in that performance of that and the sound of it. I mean, even today when I hear that song, I listen to the recording. I mean, it still sounds relevant to me, even though it was recorded in 1969 or 1970. I mean, it's just so much energy there, and just the sound of everything was just so captivating to me. So they both kind of went hand in hand for pretty much from the beginning for me, which
Wow.
is interesting. Yeah.
Well, recording sessions, as you and I both know, you either capture the moment or you don't. And the sound has a great deal of why you can capture that moment. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to, I've always said that, it has to move you.
Yeah.
Music should move you in some way, shape, or form. Make you happy, make you sad, whatever it is. But if there's no emotion in it, then why are we doing it, right? I mean, that's hopefully as musicians, that's what we're trying to give off to our audience and our listeners, is that that there's some feeling and emotion in what we're trying to say or play. You know.
So talk about the recording engineers that inspired you to pursue this career path.
Yeah, well, initially, I had no idea what a recording engineer was. I just knew that, I liked the way that the music sounded, and I was just fascinated with it. But obviously, as, I got older, I realized that there were people that were involved that, captured those sounds. So, growing up when I did in the, early 70s, and all the music that was always playing in my house, I have older siblings. So, my sister was/is still a hippie. She was at Woodstock and Altamont. She was there for all that stuff. So I heard all of the stuff from that era. like I said earlier, growing up, my parents always played, Sinatra and the standards in the house. And I have an older brother that was into more rock and roll. So, those influences were really big. But for me, what I grew up, really loving was, now the term is classic rock. It was the Beatles, it was the Stones, Led Zeppelin, the Who, bands like that, all of those British bands, the British invasion bands. And when I was old enough to finally, have a concept of what was going on, of course, it was, Jeff Emerick who recorded the Beatles, and then really, later on for me, it became Andy Johns, who recorded Led Zeppelin, and the Rolling Stones, and his brother Glenn Johns, who recorded the same band, Zeppelin, the Stones, the Who, and of course Eddie Kramer, Jimi Hendrix. So, those were the guys. I wouldn't say that I looked up to them because I didn't know what they did or how they did it, but I knew that they recorded those records, and those were the sounds that I loved, and enjoyed, and wanted to, someday try and capture myself if if I could.
Who did you study recording engineering with?
Well, that's an interesting question, and the answer is no one.
Wow.
I taught myself, and I'll be kind of brief on it, but my first recording experience was at Shorefire when I was 15, when the studio first opened in 1978, and I was so unhappy with the way that it came out at that point in time that I just said, you know what, I'm going to do it myself. I'll figure out how to do it. And that's kind of how I started in this path, is that, I bought, some little stuff, whatever I could find, a little tape recorder, a little 2-track, a microphone here or there, whatever it was. And I just started experimenting on my own, and it's not that, the first time you walk into Shorefire, as it's a great big room. It's very intimidating.
Yes.
So I'm sure a lot of it, the reason why I wasn't happy with it was my own performance and inadequacies, that happened during the recording session, But I didn't realize it at the time. But I'm sure there was a lot of intimidation there, So when people come in, I realize that, and I try and make them as comfortable as possible, and let them know, say, look, I know it's a big room, it could be intimidating, but just relax. I'm not going to have any pressure. I'm not going to, try and dictate anything to you as far as what, how the session go, is going to go. You tell me what you want to accomplish, and we'll try and get to that goal.
Well, let me piggyback on that, if you don't mind.
Of course.
I've been a recording session musician for many, many years for different producers and studios in the tri-state area. And I did find that when I first met you, which we'll talk about in a little while, I don't want to be stereotypical here, but most of engineers, besides being an engineer, want to be a producer, or they are a producer, and right away they start to give their input, their 2 cents, or after you leave a session, you'll come back and they'll go, oh, listen, I fooled around with that track that you did. Let me play it for you. I'm going, who gave you permission to do that? Well, I've got connections, and oh, that's cool, but I'm not paying you for that. If I want to go that direction, fine. Please don't do that with any of my tracks until I give you permission. You're not that person. You're not that guy, and I appreciate it. But when I do ask for your opinion, you're very honest and open and very nice about your delivery. And yeah, there's no pressure from you. It's wonderful.
Well, that's amazing that you bring up that point, because that's really, nowadays especially, I find it to be so true, and I think it's really a great line. And I try and tell new clients coming into the studio, say, look, you want to do your recordings here at Shorefire, that's great. I'll do everything I can to make make it a pleasurable experience, and get you what you're looking for. But I'm the engineer on this session. I'm not the producer, and I try and tell people that go in, because they don't know. They just assume that, especially newer kids, and I guess the newer generation of how records are made, it's usually just one person that records it, that, is producing it, is engineering it, and I said, no, that's not really how it's supposed to go. I mean, a producer is someone that you work with way before you come into the recording studio. A producer will come to your rehearsals. They'll work on arrangements, you'll work on parts, you work on guitar solos, you work on harmonies, all of those things. That's something that really shouldn't be happening in the studio, because you're wasting valuable time and money at that point. So yeah, and I'll say, look, if there's something going on and you ask me my opinion and I have an opinion about it, sure, I'll voice it, but I'm not going to, tell you, oh, you got to do it this way or do it that way. And I think a lot of it comes from, most engineers are really, musicians, and they're frustrated, and everybody thinks they're George Martin. I'm being sarcastic, of course, but he's the pinnacle of record producers, right? I mean, that guy was just, phenomenal. I mean, second to none, really, in the pop world. So, everybody wants to, be George Martin, is what I say, and all engineers think that they know better than the musician. And that is so not how it is, yeah. So it's crazy to me that, people do exactly what you say, they'll push their opinion. No, you got to do it this way. Or even after you leave, they'll change your part and play you something. Oh, this is how it should be. I mean, that's just insane to me.
Well, it's equally insane to me, and because I'm a little older than you, I used to go to these legendary recording studios back, oh my God, when I was in high school, because I was studying from a few people that were really big in the recording field in New York, and they would take me and they would say, would you like to come to a session? Because I know you're interested in being a musician. Absolutely. They said, okay, you're going to be a gopher. And being 17 years old, you're going, what's a gopher? Well, you're going to go for corned beef. You're going to go for soft drinks. Yeah,
you're going to go for coffee, right? Exactly.
Right. I said, whatever you need. So I would go and I would see these legendary studio session players play. Just first take, play it. But everyone had a position. You had the conductor. You had the hand copyist. You had the songwriter, you had the musicians, you had the engineers. And I remember back then, and I know you know about this too, it was all reel to reel. And you would have one or two engineers behind the console, with the faders, and that was their job. I mean, they were not hired to do anything else. And
that's right. We used to call, some of us were called tape ops, because we were operating the tape machines, specifically doing that and editing tape. Yeah. So absolutely.
You'll find this fascinating. I know I'm veering off a little bit, but this is all connected. One of my favorite producers, engineers, is Tom Dowd, and I know you know about him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
My God, legendary recordings. I was watching something on YouTube just this past week. I had no idea that he invented the faders.
Wow. I didn't know that either.
Isn't it amazing?
That's amazing.
He was in the studio for so long. I mean, for many years, he did everything from, oh my God, Charlie Parker all the way up to the Allman Brothers. I mean, you don't find engineers or producers that have such a span. But since he practically lived in the studios, he said, why do I have to turn a knob to turn the volume up? He invented that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's fascinating,
Well, thank you, Tom Dowd, for that. Because that certainly has, revolutionized, what we do in the studio.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And speaking of studios, let's talk about your engineering credits that include work at Abbey Road Studios in London, where the Beatles and other iconic artists have recorded. So what project was that for?
Yeah, that was certainly, one of the highlights of my career. I mean, so it wasn't anything that was commercially available, but I have a client. His name is Carlos Aram, and his son Michael is really a prodigy pianist. He's gone on to be. He studied at. I want to say it's USC, might be UCLA, but at any rate, he's probably about 27 or 28 now. But he's a professor there already. He's toured the world. He played in Steve Vai's band.
Wow.
He's yeah, all kinds of Sony. Disney artists he plays with. So anyway, but back to the story is that Carlos was a huge Beatle fan, as am I, and he wanted to go there and do a session with his son Michael and some of his friends, and we flew over to London and spent a week there and recorded in Studio 2. Yeah, so I mean, that's the studio obviously where the Beatles did 90% of their recordings throughout their career. And yeah, it was just an amazing experience.
You must have been pinching yourself to know that you were behind the console where George Martin sat. And for my young listeners, George Martin was the legendary producer and arranger for the legendary Beatles albums. I mean, that must have been very surreal for you.
Yeah, when I first came in, it was just, you're definitely awestruck. And let me just revert back that I was around Frank Sinatra, so I was around, some of the biggest people in entertainment, and I usually, that doesn't happen to me. I've met, many other people, and okay, yeah, they're just, a person like you and me. They put their shoes on the same way we do. But being in Abbey Road, that's, that is obviously the pinnacle of recording studios. So yeah, when I first got there, it was a little. You know, intimidating. But once we got to work, it was the same thing. It was work, and but every once in a while I look around and I'd say, wow, look where I'm at. This is wild.
Did you sit down at the piano where Lennon or McCartney
performed?
Oh
yeah. We recorded on the Let It Be piano. Absolutely.
Oh man.
I mean, some of the gear, they had sold off. I don't know why they did in the '80s, but most of this, most of the iconic stuff is still there for sure. But just to be in that room and in that same space where all of those legendary songs were recorded, and I actually played guitar on a couple songs, and I was in the room by myself, for a while, and it was just really an amazing experience. I mean, I truly felt that I was feeling, John and George in that room at the same time when I was playing. I'm sure it was just, me being such a fan, but I felt something there. It was just a very moving experience for me.
So let's tie that into the famous Shorefire Recording Studios in Long Branch, New Jersey, which is your studio now for how many years?
I purchased Shorefire in 1995, so I guess I'm going on. It'll be almost 28 years in January. Well, it will be 28 years in January.
So you purchased that from the original owner, Tom Elliott, and in the purchase of it, did the original gear and equipment come as part of Shorefire purchase?
Yeah, so whatever gear was there when I purchased the studio was included. Yeah, there was, there wasn't. A great amount of equipment, but there was there was a lot of really great gear. I mean, a Yamaha C3 conservatory piano was there. It was a 1960 Hammond B3 and a Leslie 122. There was a drum set. There was a guitar amp. There was a bass amp. There were some mics. Obviously, a recording console, a tape, 2-inch tape machine. So the basics were there in place already. So yeah, all that was there, and then of course over the course of my tenure there, I've brought a lot of different equipment in, and I had another studio prior to that for about 12 years in Asbury Park, that I had brought all of the equipment that I had procured and at that time over as well.
So have you modified and or upgraded Shorefire in the years that you've owned it?
Well, minutely. I mean, I've the upgrades for me are the equipment purchases and things that I've brought in. I purchased a different console in 2005. So for me that was like the biggest upgrade that was made to the studio. Again, going back a little bit, talking about my influences, with the Stones and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, the Who, and all those bands from, excuse me, from that era of rock and roll. In my research, I've found out they all recorded on one specific console, not just, but one brand, and it's called a Helios, Helios. So, back then, I was still kind of, really into, trying to emulate that sound. So I scoured the world, and when I found one and had enough money, I purchased a Helios console for the studio. So that was, the biggest upgrade I did, I would say, from an equipment purchase. Of course, I purchased many microphones and EQs and compressors and all stuff that, I felt the studio needed. And excuse me, uh, but at the time, when I even first started getting into the recording thing, I knew, that what the value of a good piece of equipment was. So I always, tried to buy the best tool that I could at the time, as opposed to, I'll get this for now. It's not really what I want. So if I couldn't afford it, I wouldn't buy it until I could afford, what I felt I needed, for the studio.
Well, let me add on to that especially for my young listeners. If you own and operate a recording studio, one of the biggest things you have to do is list your equipment, your gear, because the people coming in obviously know the type of equipment they like to operate and be recorded by. And that's probably why you get a lot of clients that go, oh, I love what you have here. I know about the studio. I love how big the room is, and that has a lot to do with the sound.
Yeah, I mean, all of those are definitely contributing factors. I would think that, I bring a little something to the table, because of what I do. But yeah, the room for sure, that there are not many rooms left in New Jersey, or I would say even on the East Coast of America, for that matter, the size of Shorefire. So that's I think a big drawing factor is, like, if bands want to come in and record live, I can accommodate that. I have 4 different isolation areas, so I could set the drummer up out in the main room, but yet I could isolate a guitar amplifier. I could isolate the Leslie uh, part of the organ. I can isolate a bass amplifier, but all the musicians are still out in the room playing next to each other and together. So, for instance, if they do a great take and the bass player makes a mistake or two, we can go back and punch in his parts because his amplifier was isolated from the drum, so his drums weren't bleeding into the bass microphone on his amplifier, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, so I do get a lot of that because of those capabilities at the studio, and I can accommodate that.
And recording facilities back in the 60s, 70s, they would purchase these huge rooms because most bands would record live, like Abbey Road. You can get a whole orchestra in there, and from the size that you have, which is really huge, it's almost like Abbey Road, I would say. You can get a small orchestra in there.
Yeah, you can, and yeah, that was the goal back then. Was to be able to accommodate orchestras and be able to play live. I mean, things have certainly changed now. I mean, most studios are in people's bedrooms, or in their homes, in their basements, that
Right.
don't have those kinds of spaces, and it's not you don't necessarily need it for a lot of music that's being produced today. If it's pop music, dance music, whatever. I mean, even people just to do their own overdubs, that they can have just a small space that they've turned into an area where they can record. So you know things have definitely changed. I'm not sure it's for the better or for the worse, but it's different for sure.
So, speaking about change in your industry, what are your thoughts about analog recording versus digital recording, and what do you prefer and why?
No, great questions. Yeah, the advent of the digital audio workstation, DAW for short, has brought a whole new revolution in the recording industry. Where anyone could purchase a computer, some software, a mic, a little interface, and they're making records in their home. So that's great. I mean, I applaud that technology for people to be able to work out, if they want to work out their song ideas, and like I said, even if you take it to the next step, and you want to do your own overdubs on stuff like that, it's wonderful. And I'm a big proponent of the digital recording. There's so many advantages as opposed to disadvantage. The main disadvantage for me is the sound. unfortunately, for my ears, nothing sounds like analog tape.
Oh no, absolutely.
But the disadvantage is that you can't do what you could do with it. You could do digitally in the computer. The way you can manipulate it and do things that would take forever to do on analog tape, or not even be able to do on analog tape. It's just one of the things, for instance, is if I'm doing a mix for a client, and this is kind of the way that I, run the studio. It's a little bit of a hybrid thing. Is I'll try and record everything as much as possible, analog, through all of the microphones and the mic external mic pre's and compressors, all that stuff. But once it's recorded and we get to the mix stage, I'll try and keep everything pretty much in the computer, except what we call is we'll break it out of the box. So in other words, it's not being all mixed inside of the computer. You're mixing, but I'm also bringing the audio back through the console to get the sonic footprint, for lack of a better term, of the console. But I'm using all of the digital advantages that we have in terms of automation and plugins and being able to totally recall it. And that's why I do it, is that, I if we do a mix and somebody goes home and 2 days later they want to make a change, it's recalled instantaneously, or a week later, or a month, or a year. Or I even had a client who just came in 10 years later, and we're working on stuff 10 years and it's exactly the way I left it 10 years ago. And to try and emulate that or recreate that in the analog world, it's next to impossible. I mean, you'd have to take pictures and write these massive notes, and even that, it would never be exactly the same as it is when you do it digitally. So again, the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages.
Not to mention the years before digital, you had analog, you had reel-to-reel recording. And if you had to make splices, cut it, the engineer would have one hand on the left reel, one hand on the right reel. You would hear the sound to say, are we cutting here? And you'd have to have phenomenal ears to say, no, a little bit left, a little bit right. And then you would pray. Right. You would cross yourself to go.
In nombre de Padre, Filii, Spiritus Sancti, Amen.
Right. And once it's done, it's done.
Yeah. Well, but there's something to be said for that, and that was, kind of the beauty of recording, on analog tape, is that, you had to be able to play, you had to be able to sing.
Oh, yeah.
When you went into record, it was destructive. Like if you had a performance there and you said, yeah, well, let's try it again. I think let's punch in the guitar solo here. If you didn't play it right, you had to do it over and over and over till you got it, as opposed to today, where in digital, you can undo it, it's non-destructive. You could do multiple playlists and comp it later, so again, there's good and bad about everything.
So share with my listeners the roster of famous South Jersey music artists that have recorded at Shorefire, that include Bruce Springsteen and Bon Jovi. And then share with my listeners how you and I met and what recording projects we have worked together at Shorefire.
Yeah, I mean, so Shorefire, since, it's been open since 1978, it's pretty much seen everybody and anyone from the area, starting, of course, with Bruce and, Bon Jovi, so everyone, Skid Row, Southside Johnny, Monster Magnet. I mean, and any band, or artist that was, from the area, back in the day, if they wanted to stay local and record, Shorefire was the place to go to. But, as artists became more and more successful, they were obviously able to build their own recording studios. And, so a lot of that has certainly, gone by the wayside, as far as, Bruce obviously has a big studio in his house. And, so most of the, I don't really see those types of people anymore. So the bread and butter of my business has certainly been local talent and local musicians, and as the way it should be, and so in answer to your next question, I'm pretty sure one of our first, meetings and working together was with one of my oldest and dearest friends, Sandy Sasso. And again, I have to go back and relate the story of Blue Note Music. Well, Sandy and her husband, Charlie, were the owners of Blue Note Music when I first started, playing guitar. They had these music stores in the Jersey Shore area. They had one in Long Branch, which was their original store. They had one in Belmar, which was their second store. And then they had a third one in Point Pleasant in Ocean County. So really, Sandy and Charlie are like my oldest friends from the shore. I've known them, almost 50 years, which is quite amazing to me. I'm pretty sure one of our earliest encounters was working on Sandy's big band record. Was it called Nick? Was it called Nick's Grill? That record, was that one?
That's right.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that? And us meeting, because after that we also did a number of different recording projects that you called me on or told different producers about me, and we would record.
Yeah, Sandy's session was, really great for me because, it was, we hooked up again after many years of, not that we hadn't spoken or talked, but, we hadn't seen each other in some time. I mean, I had gotten married, I was raising my family, whatever, but when Sandy, gave me a call and she wanted to do this record, it was just like, yeah, we got to do this, So, and for me, it was really a great experience because not that I have never did it before, not great English, not that I had never worked on a project like that before, but it was a big band thing. It was a little bit more swing. It was more standards, I guess I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunately, but I got pigeonholed as to being this kind of rock and roll guy. Like that's the only thing that I could record. I didn't know how to record a drum set if it wasn't a rock guy playing. Which just does really. I mean, if somebody comes in and they're playing the drums, whether they're doing a jazz date or whatever it is, I mean, I'm going to record the drum set and make it sound the way it sounds in the room. I'm not going to put distortion on the drums and make it sound like something totally 180 degrees opposite of what it's supposed to be. So it was just a strange concept to me. But at any rate, Sandy's session was just great because I knew that she was going to have phenomenal players on it. Everybody's going to have chops, right? And we cut it, the whole rhythm section live. It was it was drums, it was bass. I mean, there was a upright bass. There was guitar, there was keyboards, and then of course, you came in and did your magic with your horns, with your arrangement and your playing and your section. So it was just a wonderful project to record and mix.
Well, thank you. That was between 2007 and 2008. But when she first told me where she wanted to record, I said, I know of Shorefire. I've never recorded there, but I know of it, mostly as a rock and roll place. And she said, well, my friend Joey DeMaio has it's taken over the studio. It's got a magnificent sound. I want you to come visit with me. I said, okay. And she's, let's, take one song. Let's see how it goes. And so I have the stereotypical thing in my head, well, it's a rock and roll studio. But after I recorded one song there, I was hooked. I mean, you and I clicked right away. The sound you got on every instrument was fantastic. The product was really great. We were thrilled. It was always phenomenal just to know I was going to go there. Okay, tonight we're going to do these two songs or, these tracks or just woodwinds or just brass. To this day, when I put that album on, which is not that often, I still smile, not because I did it, but because it came off. We captured that magic in a bottle. So thanks to you, your magnificence, the way you ran the studio, your knowledge of that room, the microphones, the placement, the mixing. You were very kind in letting me, co-mix it with you at certain times. And then, of course, you did, the final and the mastering. You took care of all that. But, yeah, I had a great experience with that. So thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Scott. I mean, I appreciate all the kind words. But, it was a team effort, and again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. But, yeah, the rock and roll thing, it's great, and of course, I love doing it, but, I love all kinds of music, and I've recorded all kinds of music through my career. I've recorded rap, I've recorded jazz, I've recorded country, I've recorded classical music, so, just because I have long hair and I play in a rock and roll band doesn't mean that's all I could do, so, but I think at this point in my career, people get that, so I think that I'm past that part of it, which is good.
A real true great engineer uh, has to have a great foundation as a musician, and you certainly have that, and you have great ears, and that's what it takes. Like Sandy,
that's part of it. Yeah,
Sandy is a great vocalist, big band vocalist and combo vocalist. She commands an audience, but she was never in the studio, and she was quite nervous. But I helped her every time we were there, and we would hear the playbacks, and she was, extremely excited and happy, and we walked her through it. But after that, she had, two or three other albums that she did, actually 3 other albums on her own. So I'm very proud of what she's done in her recording career, and we had a great time there. So once again, thank you for all that.
Well, my pleasure. Yeah, it was a great experience for sure, and hopefully we'll do it again in the future.
Oh, I would love to. So in order for my listeners to get a sense of who you are as a recording engineer and as an artist on your own, please pick 2 or 3 tracks from your catalog of recording projects that I can filter excerpts into this interview as you talk about them now.
So one of the tracks that I would love for you to play is from an artist. His name is Peter Viteska, and he has a band called Peter V and Blues Train. So I've kind of become like the blues guy around the Jersey Shore area. I get a lot of blues bands coming in, and again, and I think a lot of it is because of the fact that blues guys like to play together live. There's not a lot of we don't record the drums first and then overdub the bass and overdub the guitars and overdub everything. These guys go in and play kind of old school style. So I think that this particular song, captures that. I mean, there's a little bit of production in the beginning of the song, but what you're hearing is pretty much live. The whole track. There might have been, I think, maybe a harmonica overdub after the fact, but and the vocals were cut after the fact, but the rhythm track is all live. I don't think it was one take, but it might have been a couple of takes before we got the performance.
Darling. You know that I love you. Oh, darling. You know that I miss you. You've been gone so long. You've done me wrong. I miss you so.
Oh, darling. You know that I want you. Oh, darling. You know that I need you. I've been gone so long. I've done you wrong. I miss you so.
I love all kinds of music. Blues and is certainly high up there for me. Because of the guitar playing aspect of it. There's a lot of great blues guitar players, and I certainly appreciate that for sure.
Absolutely. And if I can make a suggestion, if you don't mind,
Of course not.
because in piggybacking on what we just talked about, the perception is, that's a rock and roll recording studio. I just mentioned that we did a big band album there, jazz. For the people listening and for the seasoned musicians out there and looking for a space to record that are jazz musicians, contemporary musicians thinking of recording, look no further. You've got to consider Shorefire. This is one of the tracks that I produced and arranged on Sandy's Mixed Grill album. As I mentioned, this is back in 2007, 2008. During this recording project, she calls me and says, "Hey, I've got a great novelty piece that I would really like you to work up an arrangement, and it's called Ain't Nobody Here But Us Chickens." Perfect title for a novelty song. And this song was originally recorded by saxophonist and singer and entertainer Louis Jordan with his Timpani 5. This was recorded back in 1946. He did a lot of boogie woogie and what we call a jump swing. Very, very fast type of song. But what Sandy wanted me to do is to arrange it in her style, bring the tempo down, beautiful, swing groove, with the whole big band, and to, have a flavor of what Louis Jordan did there. This is Ain't Nobody Here But Us Chickens, if it gives you an idea or a sense of why you should record at Shorefire if you're a jazz musician.
Was taking the air, locked up the bonnet with the greatest of care. Down in the hen house something stirred when he shouted, "Who's there?" This is what he heard: "There ain't nobody here but us chickens. There ain't nobody here at all. So quiet yourself and stop that fuss. There ain't nobody here but us. We chickens trying to sleep and you butt in and hobble, 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 hobble with your chin. There ain't nobody here but us chickens. There ain't nobody here at all. You're stomping around, you're shaking the ground, you're kicking up an awful dust. We chickens trying to sleep and you butt in and hobble, 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 hobble."
So, as a recording engineer and businessman, how important is the use of social media to you?
Yeah, social media is a necessary evil. I mean, obviously, I have a website. I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram page. I have a Twitter page. But being a sole proprietor, it's sometimes a little daunting to try and keep up on all of those things. So, I do. When there's something that I feel like it's something interesting that whoever might get something from it, I'll put a post up, whether it's a live video or it's a picture of an interesting piece of equipment. The other day, I had this really wonderful harmonica player, Mikey Jr., come in and play some harp through an old Fender amplifier that I have at the studio, and it just has this amazing sound. I mean, this guy is just a great talent on top of it. And again, it goes back to it's a lot of it's him and how he plays and what he does. But yeah, so I put that up, because this guy was blowing his harp through this amp and it just filled up the whole room. So I thought people would get, be interested in seeing something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's tough to keep up on it, but you have to do it, so it's all part of trying to, keep your potential clients, interactive with you and seeing that you're, at least viable and doing something out there. So.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you're saying. And I did catch that Instagram video. It was
you saw that?
really
Yeah.
great, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got the sense that he was a great musician and is in a great room and, just having a great time.
Yeah. Well, that's hopefully, that's what we try and do at Shorefire.
Do you have any musical or life philosophies or catchphrases that you live by?
Well, the one I always say is never trust anybody who doesn't like the Beatles. So I say that a lot, and of course I'm joking, pretty much, but really, it's if you don't like the Beatles, where we going?
Do you have any upcoming recording projects at Shorefire that you'd like to announce?
Yeah, I mean, Shorefire is relatively, consistent. I mean, there's always something going on. I mean, I always have new projects coming in. Doing different things. So nothing specific that I would like to announce. Sometimes I'm in the middle of starting a new project with a band or a solo artist. Sometimes we're in the middle of doing some overdubs. Sometimes I'm in the middle of mixing. So Well, I've been blessed, Scott, to be able to scratch out a career for almost 40 years. That's something I love doing, and I still love doing it. So, the good Lord's been very good to me. So I certainly, I can't, I'm one of the luckiest men in the world, to be honest with you, as far as I'm concerned. You have your professional life, you have your family life, you should have your, personal life where you do things that you enjoy. And I have all of that. I'm married with 3 beautiful children. I'm blessed there, of course. I have my business that, is functioning and thriving. And, I have bands that I play with. I have my original band that you played earlier, the Killing Floor Project, where, we get together and write songs at our own kind of time frame and tempo. We're not under any deadlines from, Warner Brother Records to put a record out. We do it at our own pace because we enjoy it. And I play in a Paul McCartney tribute band called Pure McCartney. And, how much more could I possibly want out of life? I get to play the music I love with the people I love doing it with, so it's, again, I'm a very lucky person.
How did I miss that you were in that tribute band? I follow you guys.
I'm not sure. We've only been doing it really. August was a year that we did our first gig. I mean, we kind of, started it right before COVID. We had every plans of going out and playing in 2020, and of course COVID hit, and it put a damper on it. And then we had a couple of member changes in there, so we really didn't get out till August of 2021. So yeah, I mean, we've been playing, and of course by the name Pure McCartney, we do everything that Sir Paul, not everything, but it's only based upon Paul McCartney music. Obviously, Beatles that he sang, wrote, solo recordings, Wings. So we try and capture his whole career, as far as his catalog of music.
Wow. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I'm more intrigued now. I've been following you guys for a while, but and my schedule's dictating that I can't often see certain people that I would love to see. But when the opportunity arises, you'll see me in the audience. I'll come up and say hi. Where can my listeners find you and your studio on social media?
So my website is ShorefireRecordingStudios.com. Just put in Shorefire Recording Studios in your Google search. I'll pop up. That's the main one. That has pretty much everything that I do. Equipment, pictures, all that good stuff. I have a Facebook, Shorefire Recording. An Instagram, Shorefire Studios. Twitter, Shorefire. So just put in Shorefire, but it's spelt like down the shore, Shore, not like the microphone, Shure, or the word sure, Sure. It's shore, like down the shore, Shore. So if you put that in Shorefire, I'll pop up.
Well, Joey, I can't thank you enough. I loved being on this end of the music business to interview you. I've seen you behind the glass at console at your recording studio for years, but this is another angle for me. You've been very giving of your time, and I thank you so very much for this. And I'm sure my listeners have appreciated everything that you've been talking about. And I hope the musicians that are out there are driven to contact you and schedule a recording session at Shorefire.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Scott, for reaching out and asking me to be on your show. It's been, absolutely wonderful to talk with you and to catch up a little bit. It was my pleasure, and I hope your listeners, get a little something out of it. And, I'm sure, we got many more to come.
Well, I look forward to that. Okay, Joey, have a great day. I look forward to speaking to you once again. Take care now.
You too, Scott, and your listeners. Thanks for listening. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining me on today's show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and could hear why my guest got chops. You can follow my podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Anchor.fm, and stay connected between episodes on Instagram at Got Chops Podcast. Join me on the next episode when we discover why my next guest got chops.